Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you to the fourth interview of the series that we've been doing, the Measure 109 Training Program series. Before I jump in, I want to give a little preamble about Portland Psychedelic Society. We are an entirely volunteer-run organization, and we exist largely on donations and volunteer efforts. If you are here with us in the building tonight, we do have some QR codes over there for our Linktree or directly to our Venmo or PayPal if you'd like to give that way. If you're watching online, you can check out our website or go on Instagram and click the Linktree that way to offer us some contributions for all of the events that we put on through the Portland Psychedelic Society. As I mentioned, we have been doing this training program series for about 4 months now, 5 months. We skipped December, so we're catching back up a little bit for January. And tonight I have Brian Pilecki here with me from Fluence training program. And we're gonna go through a list of questions. If we have time at the end, we'll ask the audience for anything that they'd like to know or have clarified. But first, Brian, do you wanna introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a bit about what role you're playing with the Fluence training program?
Sure. So good to be here. Thank you for having me. And I think this is such a great service that you're providing to help educate folks and help people make good decisions about if this is right for them and which program. I know can be overwhelming. So I'm a clinical psychologist based here in Portland, Oregon. I work at a Portland Psychotherapy, which is a research and training and private practice clinic. And mostly I see clients. I have a practice where a lot of that is harm reduction and integration work around clients' personal use of psychedelics. I'm also involved in some research. We're doing a clinical trial of MDMA for social anxiety disorder at our clinic. And my role in Fluence has been to be a consultant on the development of the psilocybin training program. And I'm an instructor for one of the cohorts. So as we'll talk more about it, we have a smaller cohort-based model that has individual instructors for each of them.
Thank you for sharing. I know the MDMA trial for social anxiety was a buzz of a talking point in a lot of my different social circles, and really cool that we get to have you be a part of our conversation tonight as somebody attached to some of that monumental work. So thank you so much for being here. For the Fluence training, have you guys started your intake process? Are you in the process of training right now?
Yes, we have 3 cohorts that have begun. Two of them began in November, and so we're about 7 weeks in, and then one just began last week.
Nice. So still pretty new, but you've got the students in there.
Yes.
Cool.
We're moving.
So you have 3 cohorts. What's the size of each cohort?
So each cohort has up to 12 students, and that for each cohort there's 1 or 2 instructors. So the cohort that I'm leading is just me, but some of the other cohorts have like a dual instructor model. And the idea for Fluence is that they'll be enrolling throughout the year, so there'll be different cohorts that are starting. And I can describe a little bit about the structure if that's helpful.
Yeah, please.
A big part of the 160 hours total training involves meeting with this small cohort. So there's 2 courses, psilocybin therapy 1, psilocybin therapy 2, and that meets for a total of about 30 weeks. And each week students have about an hour and a half of self-paced, or what do they call that? I always get this confused. Asynchronous? Yes, asynchronous learning, which means you learn on your own, readings, watching videos, and things like that. And then there's an hour and a half Zoom meeting with the cohort. And so that's the 30 weeks. And then in addition to that, each cohort will be required to do a it's a 4 or 5 day in-person retreat. So there is some in-person learning, and the in-person learning module is really revolves around trauma-informed care. And so over those 4 days, that's when we spend most of the time on the modules related to issues related to cultural equity, how culture and privilege play into healthcare outcomes, and talking about various issues related to identity. So that's, everybody will complete that at some point in their 30 weeks of the weekly learning module.
Gotcha. So you said you are an instructor of one of the cohorts?
Yep.
And then, but there are 2 other cohorts?
Yes.
And who are the instructors for those 2?
So it's Joseph McCowan and Johan Eriksson teach one of the cohorts. And the other cohort is, I'm going to forget their names. I'm forgetting their names right now. It's Alex and Kellen Thomas.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the way that you have this divided, is it like that cohort works with, if it's your cohort, you the entire time, or is there sharing of, you do all of it with your cohort?
Yeah, so for my cohort, you know, we will meet weekly in our little 12-person pod, but a lot of the materials that students are encountering outside of that, videos, lectures, are from the whole, you know, the curriculum is coming from Fluence. So
Gotcha.
I'm not, you know, it's the curriculum is a shared curriculum, and the trauma-informed retreat is multiple instructors.
Right. Okay, I see. Yeah, that's making, I think I missed something about the structure of, so a lot of it is online.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, the asynchronistic learning, as you were talking about.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yes. So, who are the founders of Fluence, and where does the curriculum come from? I know that Fluence has been around before psilocybin training. They do a lot of ketamine-assisted psychotherapy training.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm just wondering who they are, and if you could tell us a little bit about them.
Sure. Yeah. So Fluence was founded by Dr. Elizabeth Nielsen and Dr. Ingmar Gorman, who are clinical psychologists, and they both have experience in the with MDMA trials and psilocybin trials. They began Fluence about 5 years ago, and they've done a whole range of trainings for community professionals. So, you know, I went to one of their trainings in 2019 and learned how to do harm reduction and integration therapy in private practice world. So that was, you know, some of their earlier work. And they also are involved in providing trainings at conferences, at different clinics, and they do a lot of training for clinical trials. So, you know, I was part of training some therapists at the University of Michigan. They were doing a study on psilocybin for fibromyalgia. So we went out there and we trained the team that will be actually, you know, seeing the participants in that trial. So they've been training professionals in this space for about 5 years now.
Wow, yeah. It feels so groundbreaking, but it's really interesting to hear of people who've been doing it for a little bit longer. And yeah, cool to know that Fluence has that history and that experience and expertise in this sort of unraveling new territory that we're in. What, if any, are the prerequisites for being admitted to the program?
Yeah, so one of the things that makes Fluence maybe unique, I'm not sure, but that Fluence really tries to focus on is working with healthcare professionals of any type, really. So you don't have to be a currently licensed professional. You could be retired or you can be unlicensed. So really the minimum requirement is that you have some experience with patient care. So again, you could be retired and that could be part of your past. But really the learning environment is really centered around healthcare professionals. And I think there's one of the benefits to that is that there's sort of a shared language or shared understanding of seeing things. I was a student and an instructor for MAPS for a little while, and MAPS for MDMA, their 100-hour training program, was really great. But I think one of the criticisms of it was that it was for everybody. So it was for therapists, it was for MDs, it was for nurses, and it was for people with no experience in any of those domains. So we had different needs in those MAPS environment. So Fluence really tries to orient towards individuals who have some degree of healthcare experience.
Gotcha. And I know for Measure 109 specifically, there has been some question of people who have licensed professional degrees and whether they'll actually be able to operate under Measure 109. Do you have any, since you work primarily with professionals,
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts to share in that regard? Or, I mean, it's kind of like, we'll see. What do you think?
It is a bit of we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, my understanding is that with the way the rules are written in terms of scope of practice, let's say I'm a psychologist, I have a psychologist license, but if I'm a facilitator and I'm working under that license, I'm kind of under that domain. I'm under the privileges of that license, which basically means like I'm not doing the things I might do as a psychologist, like diagnose or provide mental health therapy. So as long as I am keeping those roles boundaried, then I can conceivably do both.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that. What's the cost of tuition?
So the current cost is $9,550, and that might change as the practicum requirement changes.
Gotcha. And how would you describe the culture that Fluence is creating?
Yeah, we're really trying to create a very collegial, supportive learning environment that involves a lot of feedback. So part of the weekly assignments are role plays where people on their own are given little clinical vignettes and asked to respond on their own, and then that recording is submitted online, and then students give each other feedback. I give the students feedback. There's built-in places along the way so that students can kind of know how they're doing. And my experience so far is that there's a lot of uncertainty around this. So students want that feedback. They want to know if they're on track. Am I getting this? Am I not? Am I missing anything? So we try to create smaller cohorts so that we can really get to know the students well and really assess them and give them personalized feedback to help them really grow into the role. So it's really nice to have a group of 12 students that I'll be following for 30 weeks, and it's been 7 weeks, and I feel like I already know them pretty well. I spent the 4-day, weekend retreat with them. So, I think we also have a focus on harm reduction or safety. That's kind of really built into our philosophy and orientation. And we also have a strong emphasis on diversity that's integrated throughout the entire curriculum. So it's not just when that module comes up, we try to talk about it as it presents with many of the topics in all of the learning modules.
With such small cohorts, and I love that you mentioned harm reduction as sort of a front leader in designing the culture around that Fluence is creating. What is the screening process like in receiving applications, and how do you decide who actually gets a seat in the chair?
Yeah, good question. So we have an application that prospective students would fill out, and we interview all of our students and make sure that it's a good fit for both of us. And I think part of that is really helping people understand like what this commitment involves, what it is they're signing up for, and what are the risks involved if they do enroll. What's because there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Of course, in terms of how this is all going to roll out, and so there's some degree of risk that you're taking on at this if you want to join a training company at this stage in the game at least.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be honest and transparent with people that this is pretty uncharted territory, at least in the ways that it's fitting into Oregon Measure 109 program and law that has been created around that. What kind of qualities do you look for in potential students?
Yeah, I mean, I think we want students who are, really serious and committed to learn and to be open to all of the information that's involved in the program. Folks who have demonstrated, again, some degree of professional practice, could be current, could be past, and some degree of clarity that this is the right thing for them. If there's a sense that maybe they're not sure or there's hesitancy, we might encourage somebody to think it over and come back to us, maybe after you've given it some thought or talked to some more people. So, we really want to help people make the decision that's best for them.
I know legally you can't necessarily require prior experience with psilocybin, but how do you assess for at least like familiarity with what they're getting, what they're hoping to be involved with?
Yeah, I mean, we don't, it's not a requirement, and right now our practicum experience is and I know you probably want to know about that later, but I'll just say that it involves a meditation retreat, and so part of the initial conversation is around what are your experiences with non-ordinary states of consciousness, and most students are pretty open about like what their experience, and that comes through in their application, like why they're interested in this. So.
Yeah. What do you think students should consider before signing up for your program?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the taking on risk, I mean, I think, on the plus side, people are excited about this, and it's understandable. People want to get in early and be involved in this. But there's still a lot to be determined in how this is going to actually look. So, for example, you'll need to be a psilocybin facilitator, you need to work at a facility, right? You can't just do this on your own. You need to be under the care of a licensed facility, and it's expensive to do that on your own. So I think, some people might come into this thinking, oh, I'll do it as part of my private practice, and not realize the costs associated and the risks associated with becoming a facility. So it's not clear how many facilities will open, how quickly. So it's conceivable that there might be a situation like with MAPS, where there's, I don't know how many, hundreds, maybe close to 1,000 therapists who went through MAPS training that are just like waiting for the opportunity to actually start practicing it. So we can't guarantee how soon that will be, and it is a significant investment in time and money. So, I think people should really think about, does this make sense for them now? And, for some people, I do think it makes sense to wait a little bit and see how things play out, wait for maybe a little more stability out there. So I don't want to discourage anybody who's really excited, but I think some people in their excitement may not realize exactly what the state of things is right now.
Yeah. I really appreciate your transparency, and I want to honor the fact that like this is such uncharted territory, and I think it's really, I have a lot of respect for what it seems like you're offering your students in evaluating and assessing the risks that are associated, and at the same time, sounds like you're not having any trouble with application and people having interest in participating. So it's kind of this really promising dynamic of a lot of trust that's being demonstrated by students and by trainers and facilitators who want to see this go through, and we want to do it with the best possible tools and skills and resources to see it done well. Will the teachers of your program be required to take the training themselves, or what's their level of experience with the psilocybin training specifically?
Yeah. So our instructors, all of us have some experience or connection to clinical research. Most have been involved in the clinical trials themselves, so they're bringing that experience. And yes, we are required to go through the training program ourselves. So I am an instructor for one cohort, and I'm a student in the cohort that just started last week, which is a little strange to be a student in the curriculum that I'm teaching. But that's what OHA said, is you have to go through the training. And so I'll just be like any other student. And, I look at it as an opportunity to learn from each other. Like, there's really no huge experts here. Folks at Fluence, and we're bringing our experience with the clinical trials, and people have been doing this for a little while. And at the same time, this is, a new thing for all of us to some degree. And so the classroom that I'm involved in is comprised of other students that are really awesome and have their own talents. And so, we really view this as an opportunity to learn from each other, and seeing that everybody has a unique talent or perspective that they're going to bring to the table to enrich the whole learning community.
Is there an opportunity for scholarships through your program?
Yeah, so Fluence does have scholarships that are available that students can apply for. And then I think some of our students receive a scholarship from the Healing Advocacy Fund.
Special connection there, yeah.
I'm not sure what the partnership is or how that works, but I think that's the case for some of our students.
Yeah. As you are in the practice of training people in this healing modality, how does Fluence, how will you, with your one cohort, address risks of spiritual bypassing and concerns about like false sense of enlightenment as they go through the process?
You mean like in our students themselves?
Yes. And I mean, if you're taking the training too,
sure.
I don't mean to be too forward there, but like as you said, you just started the training with another cohort, and so for anyone who's prepared to graduate through the Fluence training program, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the whole, for those of who may be unfamiliar, the idea of spiritual bypassing is kind of like looking to psychedelics for a quick fix or to avoid your problems or for a shortcut. And those of us who work with these medicines know that that's not what happens. And in fact, going in with that mindset can lead to some difficult experiences. So I think we try to it's something we talk about throughout the training, and we talk about the importance of setting expectations for our students, and then when they're working with clients, how it's important to, in preparation sessions, work with clients around making sure that they're having a good expectation and prepared for the potential for, let's say, repressed trauma to come up or challenging experiences. And again, because we can really closely monitor a smaller cohort, we can really get to know the students and provide individualized feedback. So we can help people if we see any evidence of that sort of thing happening, help them maybe become more aware of that and make an adjustment if necessary.
Yeah. I think, I had something, but I lost my train of thought. How will you, this is what I was going to say. The spiritual bypassing too, part of that, like you said, anybody who's working with these medicines knows that it's not just a magic solution. And that even folks who have done a lot of inner work and folks who have done, gone through psychedelic therapy or expanded states of consciousness of some kind, there's still issues of shadow side, and none of us are absolved from making mistakes or doing something wrong. And how will Fluence plan to address accusations of harm or problematic behavior against any faculty or potentially any students who graduate from your program?
Yeah, it's an important question. So, in this, we have like a student handbook and a guidebook that has a formal grievance policy that students will have, will get upon enrollment, so they'll know what to do in terms of contacting folks within Fluence to address any complaints or grievances or issues. And the whole training, all the training programs are being monitored by HEC, the Higher Education Continuing Something Commission, maybe, which oversees training programs. That's another avenue for students to go to if there's an issue with any of the trainers. And we meet as a team with Fluence to just talk about how things are going, to discuss the developments and the challenges that might come up. So we are trying to maintain the highest degree of integrity and ethics amongst ourselves as we grow and try to meet this demand.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. What do you consider unique about Fluence compared to other programs?
Yeah, I think the piece about Fluence has been training professionals in the area of psychedelic assisted therapy or psychedelics for years now, and so they've developed some methods and some exercises, some approaches, and they've kind of figured out like what works, what doesn't work, and so there's some degree of that experience that they're bringing, and then I think the environment where it is for professionals like therapists or doctors or nurses, and by no means are there's not a we're not saying like the medical model is the only way, for sure. Like, we have the utmost respect for non-medical, non-healthcare professional ways of knowing. It's just that, as a learner, I'm probably going to learn best when I'm around individuals who share that background and share that common language. But, we do talk about things that are outside the medical model. So I just want to say that is something that makes us unique, but we're not trying to claim that makes us better by any means. It's just if some folks just are more attracted to that kind of learning environment.
It's sort of its own affinity group in some ways.
Yeah, right.
And it's Fluence's specialty. That's how they have been operating, how you have been operating for 5 years in the medical model of things. That makes total sense. And so the majority of the cohort learning process is asynchronistic online, meeting for you meet with them individually, and then there's a bit of a 4-day retreat kind of thing, and then there's a practicum on top of that. Is that true?
Correct, yes.
Okay. What will the practicum experience be like?
Yeah. So the practicum for now, and that this will change as this Measure 109 develops. But for now, it involves a 4 or 5 day meditation retreat, and it's a practicum that Fluence has been running for several years now, and with good results as a way to train people to kind of practice with the elements that are important in psychedelic work without using a psychedelic. So. Using principles of preparation before. So I think I'm not sure of the details, but it might involve like 1 day of silence, let's say. I think it's 1 day of silence. So there's preparation for that, right? And so we can sort of practice with that. And then there's a day of silence that's part of the retreat. And if I've done silent retreats before, and it is a bit of an altered state to just be with yourself and around people. It kind of creates a different context. And then there's integration. How does one come out of that? How does one begin to verbalize and put words to that experience? So it's a way to kind of practice a lot of the different elements that are important to psychedelic assisted therapy in a experiential kind of manner. And Elizabeth herself and a lot of the other Fluence instructors have a history also of training in contemplative studies, so meditation, yoga, mindfulness. So these retreats are designed with the idea to practice the psychedelic model, but they are also drawing on a lot of other contemplative traditions.
What is with the structure being largely asynchronistic, what's the timeline for somebody who started in the first cohort, potentially the earliest they could be graduated and trained as a facilitator through Fluence?
I think it winds up being like 8 or 9 months. So it's like 30 weeks of the online weekly thing, and then somewhere in that 30 weeks, you'll have the trauma-informed retreat and then the practicum retreat, and that can depend on when you start. So some folks might do the experiential first, or some people might do the trauma-informed thing first, because those are bigger groups, I should say. That's beyond the 12-person cohort. And so it's about 9 months, and as a student, I think that's, if you're working full time, that's still a lot of work each week. So like any sooner would require a bigger weekly commitment, and so we try to find the right balance, I think, between making it manageable in people's lives, full-time jobs, and all that, and yet getting through at a reasonable time in order to then be eligible to apply for licensure.
Yeah. Do you foresee, I know there's no way to ensure, but do you foresee any of Fluence's ability to, is there any plan to create a licensed facility under Measure 109, or is there any way for Fluence to ensure that their students will be employed after graduating?
Yeah, that's an important question. So Fluence is really focused on training, so it doesn't have any aspirations to to open up a clinical practice or something. What Fluence is trying to do is develop relationships with facilities, like develop a network of facilities where our alumni could potentially go and work. And so that's something that we've started to do already, as much as is possible. I mean, again, it'll take some time to really be able to build that network, but in the future, we want to be able to enroll people and have a very clear pathway for them to work or to get licensed afterwards. And that'll take time. I think that's another unique thing about Fluence is that as a graduate of one of their training programs, there's a pretty big alumni network that's really international. It's mostly US based, but people that I've been in some of their classes or training programs with, there's ongoing community events, there's listservs, so it's a nice community of like-minded professionals throughout the country.
Yeah, great. What is Fluence doing to provide equitable access to psilocybin services?
I mean, this is something that we talk a lot about in our trauma-informed care retreat, and a value of Fluence is to really integrate this into how we disseminate this new form of treatment. This actually came up in our first trauma-informed retreat. One of the common things when we talk about equity and improving on the current systemic injustice that we see in healthcare is that it's too hard, or not now, we'll do that later. Let's just get the program up and going, and then we can worry about equity. And that's the same story that's being told over and over again. And so, within our training program, we're really challenging our students to think creatively, and from the beginning, how can we make this accessible? Yes, it'll be expensive. Yes, there'll be corporate influences coming in, et cetera. And what can we do to, since this is a brand new thing, let's dream it from the beginning. So let's dream big. Let's try our best to do something different this time. And so that's a philosophy that's part of our curriculum. And it's not easy because our students, there's so much unknown out there. And I think, having those conversations can be challenging at times, but they, at least for me, they feel really important and meaningful, and I know they're part of our conversation at Fluence too.
Yeah, and it's not just Fluence, right? Like, this is a part of our entire community who we have at Portland Psychedelic Society, all of the different training programs, anybody who is interested in starting or participating in a licensed service center. It's on all of us.
Yes.
And I'm curious, does Fluence have any goals or opportunities to or plans to cooperate with other training programs or organizations and service centers to create like that culture of collaboration in order to like broaden and impact the larger psychedelic movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're Portland Psychedelic Society, Fluence, the other training programs, many other organizations. There's so many more and more now that are local and national. We all have the same mission, right? We want to deliver this form of healing to people in a way that is with integrity and fairness and accessibility, right? So yeah, Fluence has a lot of partnerships with other organizations and wants to build that network so that we can all work together, because we really do have, obviously, this aligned goal. And it's something that Fluence has been building partnerships with organizations all over the country. So, the hope is that, as this moves forward, it'll become clearer what this is going to look like. And it's just, I think at this stage, it's still very unknown, right? It's like, what is this actually going to look like? How long will it take? I still have clients calling me, I'm ready for the psilocybin treatment. And it's like, well, not quite yet, and there's so much suffering out there, and there's such a need for it, but it's still a little bit unclear what this all is going to look like.
Yeah, my full-time job, my actual paying job, not Portland Psychedelic Society, I do administrative work for Rainfall Medicine, which is a ketamine-assisted psychotherapy clinic, and I receive all of the incoming inquiries. And I can't tell you how many times people are asking and seeking and curious about psilocybin services. And, there's a friendliness to it, and I understand where it's coming from, but that is not what we're offering and so just explaining some of that is interesting territory. And I feel uniquely positioned to do so, as I'm part of Portland Psychedelic Society. And so it's a very safe space to ask that question.
Sure.
But yeah, the excitement and the interest is out there, and the curiosity is out there. And I want to see the entire community come together in a way to really meet these people who are seeking an alternative modality for their healing process. I'll talk about it a little bit more, but we're restructuring the format of what will be our this event next month. We're hoping to potentially interview a few students of different programs that have already started, just to hear their perspective and understand what's working and what's not working from different training programs. And I'm wondering, is there anything that Portland Psychedelic Society can do on the side of the training program stuff too? So we want to bring in students, and when you were talking, I was thinking maybe we should do a panel of like all of the facilitator or training programs that we've interviewed thus far, and just get like a round table dialogue. Do you have any other thoughts on any ways that Portland Psychedelic Society can facilitate sort of that collaborative mindset?
Yeah, I love that idea. I love, you know, the potential for Portland Psychedelic Society to be kind of a neutral party, or, you know, a bringer, you know, bringing together various voices. And I think one of the biggest needs is information and education for the public. I think, you know, a lot of the people who are attracted to Portland Psychedelic Society events probably already have some knowledge and some enthusiasm. You know, they sort of are on the inside a little bit, and there's so many people who don't really understand or know and have a curiosity. So I don't know what that would look like, and I think you're already doing this to some degree, because I know Portland Psychedelic Society is like one of the biggest psychedelic societies in the world, right?
I mean,
its numbers are so impressive, and you guys do all these meetings, and you have all these different types of ways to bring people together, groups, you know, speakers, conferences. So I think what you're doing is great, but there is that need for the public to better understand this, especially when they drive down the street and they see, you know, Psilocybin Services Center, and they go, oh, what's that? I wonder what that's about. You know, once the clinics start opening up, I think we'll be seeing even more people being curious about this.
Yeah. What more can we at Portland Psychedelic Society do to help Fluence as a program be successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, being in partnership with us as we move forward, and, you know, co-hosting events like this, and, you know, maybe there's ways to, you know, to build community together down the line. You know, we're happy to come and talk to you about what we're doing, and welcome questions from the public. If folks want to reach out to me individually, or reach out to anyone at Fluence to ask questions, I'm happy to have conversations with folks about whether or not this program is right for them. So, you know, hopefully this is the beginning of an ongoing relationship, and we can work together.
Yeah. You've been a steadfast participant, and you've led the medical professionals group through PPS for even before I was a part of it, I think. So you have a long-standing relationship with us for sure, and I'd love to support Fluence in any way that we can, in any training program in any way that we can, in a very collaborative way. And I think these meetings are really helping to do that, giving a platform and a voice to the training program to be able to speak to what they do and where it comes from, and who they are, and give the public an opportunity to decide, you know, what fits for them and what doesn't. And I want to say again how appreciative I've been of your transparency of like the risks that are associated around this, because talking about the risks isn't keeping people from actually going forward with it, but just to know of what all of this will entail, and the uncertainty that lies ahead, I think is a really important factor, and I think that just speaks to the integrity of you and of Fluence, so I really appreciate that as well. I have come to the end of my list of questions, so we'll open that up to the public who's here, and then I think Celicia maybe also had no live stream questions? Okay. Anybody here have questions? Yeah?
How are you and Fluence differentiating your medical mental health practices from the non-medical model that is the Oregon Psilocybin Services Act, Measure 109? I even heard you just at the end, once the clinics are open, which is definitely a medical term. So, how are you guys differentiating that?
Yeah, so
yourself and in your training.
I will restate the question just for the people online too, but correct me if I'm wrong. How is Fluence differentiating their training program from the medical model?
No, no. Within their teachings, how are you helping yourself and your students to differentiate what is the non-medical model, that's the Oregon model, from your clinical training, from your professional mental health training? How are you helping people to differentiate?
Got it. So how are you helping students to differentiate between what Fluence has traditionally done as a very medical model thing and what Oregon law is saying is a non-medical
Right,
model
especially
of
with the licensure,
training?
you can't do both.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's a little tricky when you're a professional, when you're used to this to think about this, and you sort of notice this. I said clinic, right? It's just like it's so built into our way of thinking, and so yeah, we're very clear that the psilocybin program in Oregon is not therapy, right? It's not therapy. It's not psychotherapy, and what we're trying to work with our students around is differentiating that role. And it's since it's so new, there's nothing like it that exists. It's hard it's new for us as instructors to kind of mentally, separate those two. One way that I think about it is that we're not diagnosing, we're not providing treatment, there's no expectations of outcome. We are really preparing somebody for an experience, and we are present with them during that experience, and then we're with them afterwards to help them transition from that experience and take with it whatever they want, whatever's valuable into their lives. And so, I think that scope of practice issue, the fact that this is not therapy, this is not mental health treatment, is a shift for us all to make. And it is something we're, from the beginning, helping our students get clear on. But again, it's tricky because it's so brand new. And in some ways, there's still some, it's a little fuzzy exactly what it's going to look like again. So the role that we're preparing people for, no one's actually working in it, no one's doing it. It is such a unique thing that Oregon has put forth. Does that answer your question?
Mostly. Just the key thing in there is you said we're still working on how to differentiate, like how to teach people. So I'm just curious if you have any examples of like things that you thought of that when you used to teach, mental health professionals to do mental health services versus now when you're teaching the psilocybin facilitator training course.
Yeah.
Like, are there any places where you are seeing differences, what you used to do compared to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so this is where a harm reduction approach is actually really useful and has been part of Fluence's philosophy. So from a harm reduction approach, and I use this in my own practice, clients are going to come to me and they want support for use of a psychedelic experience. And so what's different than, let's say, preparation in the clinical trial, where we're talking about what medicine they're going to use and what to expect, and we're telling them what dose and what, it's a very structured therapeutic intervention. From a harm reduction model, we're approaching it of, well, you know what's best for you, and I'm here to help you make an informed decision and help you do it as safe as possible. And so so that actually is really useful in training people for this role. And so, one of the ways that it's different than therapy is we're not, it is not mental health treatment. We're not relying on diagnosis, so we actually have some role plays where the client is coming in to seek psilocybin facilitation, and they say, I want help for my depression. Will this help my depression? And we're kind of coaching our students as how to respond to that, using, from the role of a facilitator. It's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a question. So in regards to job placement, obviously there's a new frontier that we're all going to step into together. And so what happens next is
So the question is, does it seem like within your student body there might be folks who are interested in creating their own service center? Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of our students are. They're interested in doing both, to become a facilitator and to open a facility. And is that sort of the question?
Yeah, I guess kind of like, what do you find? Do you feel that that's a good portion of your students or a small portion? Like, how do you see, I guess, growth? It may be another way to put that question.
Yeah, that's a good. I'm not sure what the percentage would be. I do think I would guess that it would be a small percentage want to open up a facility. Simply due to things like the cost. The license for a facility is $10,000 a year. The license for a facilitator is $2,000 a year. That might change. Hopefully, will change as the program matures. But there's also issues of risk and liability. That this is still a federally controlled substance. There's issues with banking and using, because of the federal laws and all of that. So I think for now, it's a smaller portion of folks who are doing both, because it's a lot to take on, right? To kind of pursue both at the same time. But I imagine down the line, once more facilities have opened and kind of set the pathway, and it becomes clear how to do it, and it becomes a little bit more easier to follow in the footsteps of folks who are taking the first steps, that we'll see that, that'll open it up more and more, hopefully. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I also, as far as I know, the rules and regulations around licensed service centers are still not in place yet. Is that correct?
The final draft of the rules was published. At the end of December.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was on vacation.
It is out there.
Okay,
yes.
so the clock is ticking for the creation.
They had to have the rules out before the January 2nd licensure application.
Yeah,
and stuff
before.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got some reading to do. Are there online questions?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Will Fluence continue conducting training programs that are outside the OHA required agenda, like they used to?
Yes. Yeah, if you go to the website, you'll see they have all kinds of course offerings. They offer like a ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, which has been popular. Different integration ones. They even did something on, it might have been poetry and psychedelics. So they have like a lot of different offerings, and we have, I think, close to 60 instructors at this stage, across the country. So there's a wide variety of perspectives, and that allows us to do kind of some interesting things. So they will continue with those sorts of things. Yeah.
I also wonder about the future of sort of research in this, and particularly even just research in what Oregon is doing, and any funding that might be coming through, and Fluence students and graduates being in a particular opportunity, having been trained by folks who are already familiar with the clinical trial process. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Are there any plans down the road to add to the curriculum having the people who are studying to be facilitators experiencing the use of the psychedelic themselves? As I understand, that's not currently part of the curriculum, but are there plans of adding that to the curriculum down the road?
Yeah, so the question is, are there plans of adding an actual psychedelic experience, particularly psilocybin, to the actual curriculum that Fluence is offering?
I hope so. When that becomes more available, yeah. I mean, I think that the limiting factor right now is that it's not accessible. And I will say, in addition, with the model that we're using in terms of using an experiential retreat, I do think there's certainly value in having your own experience with the medicine you're working with, hands down. And there's also some value in practicing you know, with other methods, other non-ordinary states that you can sort of generalize to. So one thing we didn't say was that all of the training programs have to follow OHA's curriculum, which is 12 hours of this and 12 hours of that. And then within that, there's some flexibility, and each program can sort of figure out how to meet those requirements. So let's say it's like psychopharmacology. There's so many hours that we have to teach about the biology of psilocybin and how it works in the brain. So, you know, within each program, there's obviously some differences in how they teach that curriculum, but the set number of hours for each of the topics, we are following to the T what OHA is requiring.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
How do you feel about the legislation that was just introduced to have mandatory data collection?
I mean, I think it should be optional. I mean, I think there's a role, you know, I think data, you know, I totally understand the issue around people wanting privacy, and I don't think, you know, I think data should always be, that's a very sensitive topic. I think it gets a little bit of a bad rap because data can be really important in demonstrating that this program works, right? So for example, one of the main thrusts of 109 is accessibility, taking it outside of the medical model so that you know, people of all backgrounds, all identities have access to it. Well, how do we know if we're successful at that if we don't collect data? We just won't know that, right? So I don't think it should be mandatory, and I think there should be, you know, I think there's a lot of guidelines around the management of data, et cetera. But I think in the right hands, it's like anything else, right? It could be used for nefarious purposes, to make money off of, sure. But in the right hands, it can be used to demonstrate that, hey, this is safe, this is effective, people are benefiting from it, and that could help convince other states that this is okay to do, or that they should, you know, adopt a similar kind of framework.
And you feel like that can happen through just voluntary opt-in to data, and it doesn't have to be mandatory data?
I mean, I'm honestly not familiar with it enough to have an opinion either way, I think, in terms of mandatory versus, like, I personally don't think it should be mandatory, and I think with an opt-in, you can do that, if that's what you're asking me.
Yeah, I just wondered if you thought we'd be able to get, if it's safe with just opt-in data collection.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so for those watching at home, the last thoughts that were shared were asking about the mandatory data collection of proposed legislation for the mandatory data collection of what the outcomes of these services are actually doing for folks. Just for context for that last conversation. Any other questions from the audience? Cool. Well, I have one last thought to ask you. For
Sure.
Anybody watching at home or any of the people in the building tonight who are interested and curious about Fluence, you've talked a lot about the program and the culture and the way that it's formatted and set up. I'm wondering, is there one last sentence or quip that you would like people to walk away knowing about Fluence and what it's offering to the Measure 109 system?
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to really lift each other up and be supportive in working together and developing a new thing that is of integrity and that maintains the spirit of what Measure 109 set out to do, which is being accessible and being available to folks of all walks of life. And so I do think there's a way to do that, and we want to welcome anybody who's interested in anything that I've shared about Fluence. Feel free to again reach out to me personally, or you can reach out to folks that you'll find contact information on the Fluence website. but be happy to answer any further questions privately with folks.
Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate so much. Oh wait, we have one more question.
I have one more question. Does Portland Psychedelic Society have any other events coming up?
Oh, it's coming. It's coming. Brian, I just want to say I really appreciate all of that you're here tonight, and all of the work that you've done for the psychedelic resurgence in general. It's impacted so much of my understanding of where this is going and where it's coming from, and it's just really been an honor to be in conversation with you tonight. So thank you so much for being here. And yes, we are continuing with this series. This has been a monthly series. It will continue to be the third Monday of the month, each month. Next month, the format is going to look just a little bit different. We're hoping to bring in students from some of the training programs who have already started and just hear some feedback from them. Very soon, we will be launching a Google form that if you're a student of a program, you can fill out if you'd like to participate in that sort of like round table discussion. Josh, who's not here tonight, is the one who will be in contact about that. Keep an eye out on our link tree if that's something that you're interested in, or if you know somebody who's interested in that. And then in addition, we have a couple different events through the Clinton Street Theater that we're planning. We have a movie it's Descending the Mountain, and the date of that is January 24th. Thank you guys so much. And you can find tickets to that on our link tree as well. In February, we have a little storytelling, yes, of Psychedelic Valentine. So all of our love stories in February 11th, around the loves that we have for psychedelics. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for participating. Thank you to my volunteers keeping me on track tonight. And thanks again, Brian, for all that you do and for being here tonight. And hopefully we can do a collaborative training program roundtable sometime soon too.
Yeah, great idea. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all so much.